Good morning. Wow, lots and lots. How good is it to be here this morning together? My name's Joy Williams. Let's bring this morning to the Lord in prayer. Heavenly Father, we come before you today with open hearts, ready to hear from you and receive the gifts you have in store for us. Lord, open our eyes to the areas in our lives that we need to lay at your feet as we seek your direction for our lives with boldness. Thank you for your mercy and grace, for being our rock, protector, shield, and the creator of all good things. In Jesus' precious name, amen. God's got a sense of humour, hasn't he? I didn't think I'd ever be sitting up here, so see how we go. Everyone on earth goes through trials, personal and with family and friends, and I see this as I read the Bible. Some do these tough times better than others, and it doesn't matter if you're a non-believer or a believer. Jesus assured us in John 16:33, "I have told you all this so that you may have peace in me." Here on earth you will have many trials and sorrows, but take heart because I have overcome the world. Today I want to speak with you about some of the trials and battles through my life, times that pushed my faith to the limits, where I walked away for a while and questioned God's love as I faced them, but also how Jesus' love continued to shine and pull me back when I could not see a way through the darkness. I've never been one for reflection or journaling, as that means actually being still and thinking, and I'm not a fan of that. But in recent times, I have realised that to reflect and to sit in God's presence is to see his work in my life, his provisions and miracles, even during the times when I didn't see or wasn't aware that he was at work. I was born February 1960 to a 15-year-old girl at McBride Hospital and was put up for adoption. When I was 4 weeks old, Betty and Rex Lumberg were invited to see a baby girl that might fit into their family of 3. They'd adopted a little boy who was 2.5, as they were told they would never be able to have kids, which had devastated them. They fell in love with this little girl, me, and surprise, surprise, I was already cooing and chatting to everybody at a very early age, a sign of things to come. They chose me as their daughter. They named me Joy, as they said this little girl had brought them great joy, but they didn't know what was to come, did they, Auntie Val? At 6 weeks old, they came and picked me up and took me home as their own little baby girl to Port Kenny, a little town on the west coast of Eyre Peninsula, and legally adopted me in August. Thank you, God, for your goodness in being chosen by Mum and Dad. Dad was a Baptist minister and Mum an amazing, God-loving, true example of Jesus living. I've recently been in contact with my birth mum and her son, and I'm not sure where I would have ended up if I'd been left in that family, so God was with me even before I was born. When I was 1, we were transferred to Port Pirie South Baptist for 3 years. Then we were transferred to Broadview Baptist when I was 4. And when I was 5.5, Mum found out she was pregnant with a little miracle daughter and my treasured sister Jan. We'd been there for over 3 years when Dad had a massive mental breakdown, which changed absolutely everything in our life. Dad could no longer preach or work, so Mum had to find a full-time job after all these years and stay straight into work, plus look after a sick husband and 3 little kids. We moved to a home in Woodville Park, which was a true answer to Mum's prayers, as she could afford to pay the loan and we could live. Life was tough until Dad was able to go back to work after a few years. During this time, we attended West Croydon Baptist Church, where I met my treasured, dearest, longest friend, Heather. By the time I was 17, church life was not a happening thing, and the outside life was fun and adventurous, and it was calling me. And of course, Joy knew best. God's path was way too narrow for me. You've heard the song A Highway to Hell and a Stairway to Heaven. Well, I'm definitely on the big old highway. It's so much easier to navigate than a narrow stairway. I lived life to the absolute full, every way you can imagine possible, but my dear mum was there beside me the whole way, bringing me back down to earth and always praying for me. Through this, that I actually never lost my faith. I knew God was quietly waiting, but hey, there was so much to do and places to see, and I wasn't going to be held back by stuffy, difficult rules. I married a non-Christian man in 1983. Life was good. Still said the odd prayer, still thought about God, went to church Christmas and Easter every year. In 1986, my beautiful firstborn son Ben arrived, and what a blessing was his. At 15 months old, 3 days after Christmas 1988, I was rushed to hospital with an ectopic pregnancy, as Bubba had fertilised in the fallopian tube. By the time I got to hospital, Bubs had actually burst out of the tube. I had to be cut open so that they could search for the baby. I had to have a number of blood and white cell transfusions. I lost the baby, but my doctor said it was a miracle I was alive, as I was 12 weeks pregnant, and history showed I should have died. I was truly, truly thankful. In 1990, I had my second blessing, my beautiful son Justin, who on day 9 and 12 choked and stopped breathing. We had to clear his throat to bring him back to life. Ambulances had to come and we were taken to hospital both times. He eventually was diagnosed as a reflux choker. The next 12 months were dark and scary, trying to keep this little Bubs alive. But again, God showed me how he was still alongside and gave me peace and provided people who came beside and gave physical help to make it easier. Again, I got distracted. Life got busy. With my little boys, my family life. I was away from church for the next 10 years with the yearly visits to church. In 2000, I started to go back to church. Mum, Dad and I came to fellowship at Enfield Baptist, thanks to Helen Stevens, who was Justin's teacher at the time, and she had such positive comments about EBC. The day we walked in, we were greeted warmly, which made such a huge difference to be greeted. We felt welcome and we immediately felt God's presence, and this was to be our spiritual home. In 2001, I was baptised. In 2007, my oldest son, Ben, at 20, contracted golden staph. To this day, we have no idea where we got it from. He was admitted to hospital and they told us that he had 1 hour window for the intravenous drug to work, and if not, he'd die. I phoned his dad at work and he told me he was very busy and to keep him posted. Ben was in hospital for 6 weeks and he had the most amazing specialist. Every day he came in personally to attend to Ben's nasty wounds, and we knew that this was a provision from God with his specialised treatment and care. The specialist asked, were we Christians? And were people praying for Ben, as his recovery was an actual miracle, as 2 other young football boys had recently passed away from exactly the same thing. Unfortunately, 3 months later, the staph attacked Ben in his arm and he was back in hospital, and they advised they would probably need to amputate his arm and blood poisoning was a possibility. They started him on the intravenous drugs again, and amazingly, the drugs worked immediately and Ben recovered with his arm intact. During this time in hospital, over the next 3 weeks, a dedicated Christian man, Stuart Andrews, came alongside Ben with regular visits, showing him the human side of Jesus' care and love. A few weeks after Ben came home, Justin was riding his pushy on his way home from school and he was hit by a car. He ended up in hospital, but again, God was in this situation, as the way Justin landed after the collision, his head could have been dragged in under the car wheels, but instead his school bag took the force and was dragged under the tyres instead. Fortunately, Justin suffered only small muscle tears and shoulder tears, which resulted in surgery later on down the track. While this was all happening, I found out that my husband had been a busy boy and was on to his 3rd affair. So Mum and Dad and I went out house hunting and found a beautiful little cottage home, and Dad walked straight into the lounge room, sat down and said, "This is your home, my girl. This is your gift from God." And he started to pray. And boy, was I looking for some good things to happen. I met my partner Bruce and times were calm and peaceful. I'd hoped and prayed that hard times were behind me and life could become steady. But nope, that's not a happening thing. Next challenge. This time I actually cried out, Lord, no more. I've got more than enough character, and surely, I'm strong enough by now. Everyone can relate. Stop. In December 2001, Dad was diagnosed with esophageal cancer after months of being unwell and undiagnosed. It was cruel and painful and took Dad to a shell of himself. On Dad's last day, dear Scott Berry, on a freezing day in the bucketing rain, visited Dad and sat with him talking and praying, which gave Dad so much peace and calm. He passed away that very night in May 2012 peacefully, reassured he was going to his eternal home. Things went on with Mum and my sister and I finding a new norm. Then in July 2015, Mum was diagnosed with mesothelioma or asbestosis and passed away 4 months later in November after a terribly excruciating cruel time. Mum was an encourager. All who knew her knew she was a Christian. As she lived life in the fruits of the Spirit and walked in the footsteps of Jesus, shining his light and love to all around. Mum was loved by all. Family and friends visited her, lifting her up, and she spoke to all of God's love and goodness. She didn't want to be drugged up, even in the pain, so that she could share the news about her Jesus, God's provision, and give thanks for all he'd done. Mum had peace and comfort in God's presence and his promises. Losing Mum was shattering and devastating, as she was my earthly rock and special friend, and this put me into a downward spiral for a time, feeling confused and lonely, wondering why God would allow this to happen to his good and faithful servant. 10 months after losing Mum, here we go again. This time I really did feel over it. Yep, I'd done some wandering from side to side across the path, but God, surely not enough to be tested and taken out again. Was I really such a bad person? On the way to work, I sustained a massive foot injury and leg injury 2 days before we were heading off to Europe. I underwent surgery, then after 6 weeks of recovery, I had to learn to walk again, which took 5 months of twice-weekly rehabilitation. But again, God provided, and my beautiful friend Ros availed herself every week, twice a week, to take me to every appointment waiting around for me. Life settled down again, and I must admit, I prayed and beseeched God lots for no more bad things to happen. I was done. I couldn't cope anymore. But I knew I was praying God would do what I thought was best, not trusting in his will. During a service in June 2021, the song I Surrender All was played, and I could feel God quietly saying, it's time to surrender. No more big weaving across the path. No more around the mountainside. Time to move from milk to solids. I felt nervous about this as I thought of walking that little thin, narrow path. That morning, the course Search for Life was offered, and I signed up. This course was amazing, and I was right where I was supposed to be at this time. There were so many light bulb moments. I actually finally realised God absolutely loves me just as I am. He totally gets me as he knitted me in my mother's womb. I was in right standing in the sight of God, and he chose me and chooses me daily. I'm actually fully forgiven through Jesus' death on the cross. I knew I could walk the narrow path because it wouldn't be in my strength. It would be through God's strength and his love. I sat in the Word deeply, and my prayer life grew, and I knew in my heart that Jesus' love was unfailing. On the 10th of June 2021, I made an appointment with my GP for breast pain. This was the 3rd time I'd had an issue, so I didn't think much of it. I had a mammogram and ultrasound, and on the 23rd of June, I was told I had breast cancer. So God, here we go again. What is this? Is this another test? Why now? I'm doing the right thing, surely. Lord, help me face this through your strength. The next step was to have an urgent biopsy, but there were no spots available for me. Then, out of the blue, the clinic doctor rang and said she would fit me in and make it full Freaky Friday. Let's go, girl, she said. I felt God's hand all over this. In Search that week, we did the topic healing and spiritual warfare, and to trust in God's truth as we feel Satan's attacks, but to know that the battle belongs to the Lord. What amazing timing. The next Monday, the 28th, an appointment was opened up to see the leading breast surgeon in SA. Again, a God provision. Then the whirlwind started. That Friday, I had blood tests, dye breast MRs, dye CT scans for organs, nuclear medicine, bone scans, all with injections. And that's my absolute worst nightmare. Hate injections. My reading that morning was Philippians 4:4-7, and God's brought this to me so many times. And last night in my reading, he brought it to me again. Don't be anxious. So that was actually pretty amazing. But by prayer and petition and thanksgiving, bring everything to God. So much peace. That whole day, I had earthly angels caring for me and making things as easy as possible. And I shared with them that I knew God was at work in this day through them. It was a huge, long day, but I felt God's peace. On the Monday, I was back at the specialist with the results, and everything was looking great. A simple lumpectomy, woohoo! Then the last pieces of a puzzle came in. Bam, kapowie. Worst outcome. Joy, you have stage 3, level 2 aggressive, HER2 triple positive breast cancer. In the week and a half, the cancer had grown from 7 mil to 17 mil with roots to 23 mils. We all sat there shocked, and I wondered, where are you, God? It's not meant to be like this, surely. That night, my reading again showed me Philippians 4:6-7, and I felt God was at work in me and changing me, and that I could do all things through his strength. I needed to trust God and shine Jesus' light through my trial and not waste my pain, that he could use my experience, and as he comforted me and took on the battle, I could comfort others. Wednesday the 14th of July, 5:50 p.m, the head oncologist of the RAH fitted me in to the end of his very busy day, having been on leave for 2 weeks. Again, I knew God was in this next step with me. He had all the info there, and they'd actually had a specialist review team that morning, and a plan had been mapped out for me as I needed to receive immediate urgent attention so that I didn't die. Due to my severe needle phobia, I had an opt to have a port put in my chest for the delivery of treatment. Wednesday the 21st, on the first of my weekly 3 months of chemo, SA went into a COVID state lockdown for 7 days. This meant I wasn't allowed to have anyone go in with me. So it was papers, forms, appointments with the oncologist all by myself. No one could come and sit with me at all. I was taken off into the day infusion room. Okay, Lord, so I meant to just trust and just lean into you only. Help me, please. I need your help. Then I met my nurses, Archie and Makey, and an absolute shout out, praise to God. They were both Christians. And I'm like, what a God gift in such rubbishy circumstances. Each week it was bloods, cold caps, treatments which took 5 to 7 hours. My dear sister devoted her time to take me to all the appointments along this path, waiting around for hours and doing everything she could to make my path easier. During treatments, as I talked with Archie and Makey about Jesus and shared our lives, I was able to share Jesus' love and goodness with others around as they joined in the conversation with me. At this time, I was also able to share Jesus' love with my dear friend Cynthia, who had been battling cancer for 6 years, and she was being prayed for by our 7x7 group. When she passed away last December, she'd accepted Jesus into her heart as her personal saviour. Thank you, Jesus. On Friday, I got caught up in a Tier 1 exposure site. This meant 14 days of home quarantine. I was so anxious about what this would mean for treatment, and went to bed feeling really down and confused. That night, my reading was Hebrews 11, 1-6, and the title was, "When we trust God, we will know and experience him through impossibilities that become possibilities." I slept in peace. The Monday and Tuesday were filled with paperwork to get police approval and SA Health approval for the hospital so I could go ahead with my urgent treatment. Tuesday, I was making calls all day trying to get approval for Wednesday. Finally, I got on to someone in SA who said she'd talk to a team leader, as no one knew what to do in these circumstances. As I waited quietly, talking to God, it dawned on me that the next door lad was a team leader on the COVID hotline. So if I couldn't get anywhere, I'd call his mum and see if I could ask Aidan if he could help me. A voice came over the phone saying, "Good morning, Aidan speaking." I felt chills, I felt tingles all over. Woohoo! Jesus' unfailing love for me. Aidan took the job on personally. 3 hours later, I had approval for treatment to go ahead, which entailed an isolated ward and a nurse volunteering to do the treatment with full PPE gear. A lovely, funny, chatty nurse volunteered, making the day so peaceful. In October, for 2 months, I started what is known as the Red Devil drug. Ironic, isn't it? The Red Devil, yep. This kills off all the bad and all the good cells. Then you get an injection the day after to restore the good cells, and every bone in your body screams with pain. There are so many side effects: fatigue, vomiting, diarrhoea, hair loss, eyebrows, eyelashes. I had to use sticks to walk, and the pain and the darkness began to swallow me up, which had a profound influence on my mood. And I walked through many dark black valleys and experienced deep loneliness and sadness. During this time, I did a lot of lamenting and wondered about heaven and wished maybe I should go there so I had no more pain and no more tears. I wasn't able to read because of my eyes, nor did I have the energy to pray, but the blessing of Christian music, to have Jesus' love sung into the darkness, was my saving grace to get me through this hell on earth. At the beginning of treatment, Heather Derrick, who had supported me throughout my life, prayed with me for the Holy Spirit to fill me, to protect my organs, and for my blood levels to be good, so treatment could continue. And not once did my blood levels drop, enabling me to have full drug doses every single treatment. It was a bit of a double-edged sword, actually, because some days I didn't want it and I was just over treatment. The oncologists and specialists were both amazed about my bloods and believed, because of how good they had been, was why the treatment was so successful. And when I went into hospital for my op on the 29th of December, the cancer had totally disappeared, and the conservation surgery only had to be done. Again, they marvelled at this outcome. All praises to God, our healer. I went on to have 17 daily sessions of radiotherapy and 9 months of weekly immuno, and finally finished September last year. This is only a snippet of the amazing things God's done for me in my trials, which still continue with my preventative cancer medication and physical therapy, but I know God is with me through all of this. I've actually been asked a zillion times over my life, how can you believe there's a God? If God is so loving and all-caring, why does he let all these atrocities occur in the world? And how can he let his own people suffer like they do? Naturally, I don't have the answer to these questions. What I do know is God often uses affliction not to punish us, but to bring us back to him. Sometimes it's only when you hit rock bottom we grow closer, that our eyes are opened, and that we are truly ready to repent and obey and to fall on our knees before our Heavenly Father. I know I'm a long way from where I need to be, but I'm closer than where I was. I do know that in the darkest of valleys, all the battles belong to the Lord, and he was always there for me. He loves us, and provides and protects us. He does not abandon us, but gives us hope and peace. God knows exactly what is going to happen and the final outcome, and we can put our trust and faith in him. Thank you.